Hi, this is Steve. And ahead of today's conversation, I thought I would just quickly hop on and let you know that the discussion today does contain references towards suicidal thoughts. If any of our listeners may find that triggering, then please absolutely do feel free to skip this episode, and we would love to have you back next week.
Welcome back to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. My name's James Lloyd.
And my name is Steve Smith.
And what do you do for a living, Steve?
I ask myself every day. I'm an alcohol-free performance coach. And what
Wow.
about you?
Well, it's a coincidence you say that because I'm an alcohol-free performance coach as well. So
Marvelous,
we both
marvelous.
we both went alcohol-free somewhere between 4 and 5 years ago, and yeah, it's had quite a transformational effect on our lives. So about 9 months ago, we decided to set up a podcast, right, mate?
And here we are,
Yeah.
1,625 days ago. And I never really check, but I did the other day because I was stumbling across the app on my phone, and I checked how many days. So yeah, be 5 years this year, which is wonderful. Still pinch myself at the thought of that, if I'm being really honest with you.
We're just thinking out loud. When we get to your 5 years, we'll have to have a special commemorative alcohol-free revolution podcast where we celebrate
We will.
celebrate your coming
I've
of
not
age.
really thought of the last few years, but 5 years coming round, it really does feel like quite a milestone. So yeah,
Doesn't feel like it, does it?
no, it doesn't. No,
Really doesn't. You sort of think how much has changed in 5 years.
mm,
A lot.
absolutely,
In
absolutely.
another 5 years, it'll all be replaced by AI robots, right? So who knows?
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
So
I'll
how's your
be
week
interested.
been?
Yeah, good week. Thank you. It was nice to meet up last week, wasn't it?
Oh, it was lovely. It's
Yeah.
always nice.
Well,
So yeah, we
share a
caught up.
packet of peanuts and an alcohol-free Guinness.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
brilliant.
yeah.
So we popped down to see to our friend Catherine Gray, our new best buddy. So she's got a new book out. It's called Little Addictions. I'm about halfway through it already.
Yeah,
And you,
likewise. It's brilliant.
what do you
Really
think?
good.
Yeah, it's really
Really
good,
good.
isn't it?
Yeah.
She's really broadened out on.
I've got my signed copy right in front of me, but I'm listening to it on audio because yeah, otherwise I'll just dog ear the book or I'll leave it in the car and it'll get mucky or so do something. I don't know. So yes, and also I'm lazy, so I'm listening to it on
Well,
audio. But
yeah, I'm the same. I listen to all the audiobooks. So I
mm,
just think you can get through it so much quicker as well
mm,
because I'm out dog walking or running or at the gym and you can listen to it. And yeah, really great book. I think it's her sixth book, and yeah, she's hit another home run.
yeah,
It's long
brilliant.
as well. It's
Yeah,
about 13 hours. This one.
yeah,
It's a
well,
lot in it. A lot of research has gone into it. And yeah, so we met Catherine. That was really nice. We'll you have to wait and see if she's going to come on the pod. We'll keep listening and you'll find
quietly
out.
hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. But
Good,
yeah,
good,
really
good,
great event.
good, good.
What else been going on? You been busy?
I've had a pretty average week, really. I've been slowly getting back into running because I've been injured, which has been driving me mad and also driving my wife mad because I become really flipping grumpy when I can't run.
Do you?
Yeah, I really do. I love, I get my exercise, get my swimming, I get my biking in, but nothing quite cuts it for me than getting out on the trails. But thankfully, I seem to be, touch wood, running pain free again. So that's a massive part of my life. And when it gets taken away, it's very rare. I'm pretty good. I don't get injured very often, but when I'm injured, it's horrible. It's
Mm.
horrible. You look out, you're driving along, you see someone running, and you just want to pull over and thump them.
You just want to mow them over in your car.
No, 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 no,
No,
no.
that's people on
But
bikes.
I
So
know that person would feel the same if they were in the same boat as well. You just look
yeah,
with
yeah,
such envy. But
100%.
yeah, other than that, it's been a good week. It's been not too bad. Yeah, ready for the spring. And
Oh, so am
I'm
I.
noticing, I walked the dog before 7, and now this morning about 10 to 7, quarter to 7, something like that, walking the dog, and it was light.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like I've got an extra half an hour in my day now because I never used to go out. I go to Penny Hill, the gym first thing in the morning, but I won't go out until it's light because I want to try and get sort of 15 minutes of sunlight. I walk there, so walk in. So there's no point going when it's dark because you don't get that sunlight. But
Mm,
now I can go at sort of 7:30. It gives me a bit of extra time in the day, and yeah, really dialing in the exercise at the moment. Sauna in every day and cold plunge and
mm.
swimming and running and yeah, really feeling it. Really feeling good.
Speaking of running.
Speaking of running, yeah, who we got on the pod today, mate?
So I'm delighted today to say that we have Rich Casement on the pod today. So Rich is the other half of Clean Break Coaching, who obviously cast your mind back to you avid listeners out there. Back in sort of September time, we had Andy Delderfield on, and Rich is the other half of Clean Break. First, kind of came across Rich about probably coming up to 18 months or so ago now, and I went on their pod myself. So we have a real a connection through running, but ultimately this is not an episode to convince anyone to run. But it is really, really lovely to hear Rich's story and how Clean Break has come around and how running and running naked is
Oh,
can be so uplifting. But don't switch off just yet. There's more behind the story
yeah.
of running naked, and it might not be quite what you think it is at first. So
Yeah,
listen
st
here.
stay with us to the end on this one because you are going to hear about Steve's plan to run naked, if that's your thing.
So, so that seems to me like a decent point to kind of break conversation and welcome to the podcast, Rich Casement. Rich, welcome to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. Great to have you along. How you doing?
Good to see you. Yeah, I just had to put my audio on mute because I just took a drink of water and started coughing. So I thought, shit, this is bad timing.
I just have I have visions now of just all this water splashing across your screen and us having to restart again. But I think you're safe. We're all good. I can see
Don't
your microphone symbol flipping on and off every so often, but
yeah,
I
don't
think
make
we're
me
there.
laugh any more than I already am. Yeah,
Good to
cheers.
see you. Good to see you. How you been?
Yeah, good to see you boys as well. Yeah,
Hi,
yeah,
Rich.
good. Yeah, like I've had 3 or 4 days of bit of a cold, so feeling a bit meh. You know, it's like proper full on man flu. I don't
Mm,
do illness.
yeah,
Like I haven't been ill for over a year, which is like been brilliant. But then actually when I do get ill, I'm like a bear with a sore head. I'm just grumpy. And the thing is, I've just sort of I've got to that age at the stage in life where I just accept it. Like, there's no point fighting it. Just
yeah.
a couple of
So,
days feeling meh. Stayed in bed. You know, didn't do much. Not very productive. This like a couple of days. Don't tell Andy. I've not been very productive this last couple of days from a business perspective. But hey ho.
you just told Andy, so it's fine. But if you want, we could chip that out. But yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of first stumbled across each other in person. Well, actually, was in person about just coming up to a year ago now, where we initially I was doing Winter Downs and kind of, but I'd been following what at the time was running dry and listening to your podcast avidly. And back in about September October, we had your podcast partner on, Mr. Andy Delderfield, who came on, or as you always describe him, your glamorous co-host,
Yeah, glorious glamorous
glorious,
co-host.
glamorous
Yeah.
co-host. We had him on
Yeah.
back in sort of September time, which was great. And I just thought, you know what, it's been long enough, but we haven't had a runner on, so we can't have a good old chinwag about running and alcohol-free life. So that's why we're here. So
Ah, good.
thanks you again. So I mean, Rich, I guess what we always start our pods by kind of going back to the beginning. If we were to kind of rewind sort of 10 years from now, what Rich would we have known then and how would things have been different?
Yeah, 10 years from now, 2020, 2016. So I was kind of in the thick of my previous career, very much a previous career. When I reflect on it now, it was a sort of a whole different identity really, because I was like similar to you, Steve, like I'd worked in the alcohol industry from pretty much the age of, when I left school at 18, worked in pubs and bars and restaurants and saved up money to go traveling. And then kind of when I went back to uni, came back after a year out, went back to uni and studied hospitality management and just like fell into that, as a lot of people do. I think in the hospitality industry, you sort of fall into it. And loved it and embraced it, and it was kind of almost more like a hobby than it was a job. And then kind of got to the end of my sort of 20s and sort of thought, well, actually, probably sacrificing weekends and things like that, was no longer where I wanted to be. So then went into sales roles within the alcohol industry, which was sort of 2010, I think. Um, cutting my teeth right through from starting life as a brand ambassador for a vodka brand, Sky Vodka, two
Wow.
Ys. You know that well
I
as well,
know
don't you,
I know it
Steve?
well.
Yeah,
I've broken it. I've
uh,
flipped a few of those bottles around in
you've
my time.
thrown bottles around in the roadhouse, haven't you?
I
Like,
have,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it was probably the irony is probably like I was probably a brand ambassador for Sky Vodka whilst you were throwing the bottles around, I would
exactly.
imagine, at
I'm
that
sure.
stage.
I'm sure. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe at some stage we probably exchanged a Long Island iced tea across the bar at the Roadhouse, and maybe can't even remember it. Who knows?
I would imagine. Well, we certainly know people anyway. We've
Yeah.
got shared sort of acquaintances
Hmm.
in the drinks industry who our paths both would have crossed. And so that was kind of the start of my career in sales in the drinks industry. Which again, if working in bars and restaurants wasn't a hobby for a job, you know, selling alcohol to bars and restaurants, on a sort of not on a 9 to 5, but on a, certainly a Monday to Friday basis, which then freed up, evenings and weekends to, still have my hobby, but then have my hobby as my career through the week was, yeah, it was a lifestyle which a lot of people dreamed of, and yeah, friends would always say to me, "You don't really have a job, do you? Like you literally get to travel the world selling, talking about, and drinking alcohol." That's pretty much it. Kind of sums it up quite nicely. So yeah, so this time 10 years ago, I would have been. I'm trying to think. I probably would have been at Matthew Clark, I would imagine.
Hmm.
So yeah, kind of national account manager, looking after a pretty chunky P&L with about turnover about £5 or £6 million of turnover. A good £500,000 of bottom line profit wise for the business, looking after top 10 accounts for their sort of national account division. And when I say national account division, so Matthew Clark is a drinks wholesaler for those that don't know. Um, and national accounts would have been like your Weatherspoons, Stonegate, Mitchells and Butlers, those kind of pub groups. So I was looking after a couple of a big casino group actually at the time, and uh, a big bar group, which was which was great in many ways. You get to combine, a little bit of the sort of the work side of things, but a lot of the sort of the social entertainment side of things as well. And I was in my mid 30s, and so I was probably at the stage where I was really starting to seriously not question, but the impact of drinking was really start to take effect. Like we just had our son, our first child. He was born in 2014. Um, and at that stage in life, mid 30s, your children come around, you go into a different phase of life. So I think I was probably starting to maybe that little question around alcohol was starting to creep in, although it would probably started at the beginning of my 30s. I was never a very good drinker. Like I loved drinking and I loved alcohol, but I just was never very good at it. Like I would get drunk really quickly, and I was just a bit of a crap drunk. Like I'd do and say really stupid things, and probably make everyone else laugh and be quite entertaining, but much to my own detriment, from in terms of sort of embarrassment the following day. So yeah, that's probably where I was.
Yeah, it's scary how much. I mean, the only thing that's not similar about our journey is that I've definitely got a few more years on you. But other than that, my first son was born in 2014 as well, and that's kind of when I started to question it. And obviously, your journey through the alcohol industry, you're mentioning, businesses you used to work for there that I clearly kind of very much remember and kind of understand how working and surrounded by alcohol can have such a part of your identity at the time. So once that question started coming up for you, how did that sit with you in the kind of role you were currently in? Because obviously it's such a big part of your life.
Well, you kind of sort of you almost try and ignore it. You almost try and deny it, because the thought, the concept of not doing the thing that you're doing for a career just like doesn't it can't come into the psyche, because it was all I'd known, really, in all fairness. Like I didn't when I went to uni, to do hospitality management. So I dropped out of uni twice. The first time I tried landscape architecture, lasted like a term, and then when I did hospitality management, I did the first year studying, then did a 12-month placement, 6 months of which was out in South Beach, Florida, in Miami, which was brilliant. As a 21-year-old English lad, I can't recommend that sort of stuff more, and then 6 months back in Leeds, with the bar operator that I ended up working for, managing their bars for sort of the next 7 years. So you never. It was all I ever knew. Like I'd built a sort of identity around this, and like when I said I dropped out of uni twice, the second time round was quite calculated. It was like, do I really need a degree to be able to go and do what it looks like I'm going to do for a career now, or at least what I thought was going to be my career, at that stage. Needless to say, when you're, in your early 20s, you probably think that what you're doing there is going to be what you do forever, and the thought of potentially doing something for 20 years and then changing it in your 40s doesn't even come into it. So it was very much like this was my identity. My identity was built around booze and learning about booze and immersing myself in the not just the culture, but the whole experience of alcohol, the sort of the glamorization of it, the production processes, all of this kind of stuff, understanding where it comes from, how it's made, all of this kind of stuff. It was a journey of real, deep education. And so what comes with that is a sense of it becomes more than just a job. Like it really becomes this whole identity, and then you end up becoming the guy that people pass the wine list to in a fancy restaurant, or you go to a friend's party and they say, oh, can you make some cocktails, or can if you got a bottle of something nice to bring round. And there was always some, I would, especially when I went into sales roles in the alcohol industry, there was always samples knocking around, whether it was wine, beer, spirits. There was always free booze available, which I would take home, much to my wife's enjoyment. Like I'd take home bottles of wine, and it just became a huge. It just became my identity. Like it really did. I can reflect, and I can look back now and see, and I see this now, that it was really everything was wrapped up in booze. Like not in a I was an alcoholic and it was a really problematic relationship with alcohol, but it was everything to me. It was and again, as I kind of went through my 30s and had kids, like to the point whereby, because I was in pubs and bars and talking about booze all week, I didn't really want to do that at the weekend. And I think that's where I started. And then I did my first marathon in 2014. I think that's where, so halfway through, my 30s, I kind of started to think like maybe this seed of, perhaps I'm not enjoying this quite as much as I thought I was. But then again, it was all I knew. So it was like, well, hang on a second. And then I'd always sort of stop myself and say, well, there's no other option now. You're kind of in balls deep, if you like. Like there's no changing this now. What have you committed the last 15 years of your life to if you're now just going to suddenly kind of get up and walk away from that? So despite kind of the sort of the pain, the anxiety, the hangover, the regret, the shame, the guilt, all of these feelings coming into it, there was still this sort of sense of denial. It's like, oh no, this is your career. This is, you kind of just got to accept this and deal with it. It went from being, I remember distinctly at one point sort of starting to feel like it went from being a perk of the job to actually being an occupational hazard. Like the perk of the job being I've always got booze available and it's great, and I'm doing this as my hobby, as a job. um and I'd always get like invites to you know openings of breweries and distilleries, and we get taken around the world to vineyards to visit producers and things like that. It's like, this is a real perk of the job. And then it started to become this occupational hazard, because wherever I went, alcohol was always there. And when alcohol was there, like, as I said before, I wasn't a very good drinker. So even after a couple of drinks, I'd be pissed and I'd start to lose control. But also after a couple of drinks, I would really suffer the consequences, waking up in the middle of the night with racing heart, feeling like someone sat on my chest, really, really kind of crippling headaches the next day. Um, and just a real sense of like, oh God, "Oh, what am I doing?" kind of thing. Why am I doing this? But then still so attached to this career that it was like this, as I say, this occupational hazard. It was like, I'm just going to have to accept it, roll my sleeves up and get on with it.
It's quite fascinating, actually, what you said there, because you really got me thinking, Rich, because you've spoken about two things there. One is your relationship with alcohol, but also getting to the middle of your career and thinking, do I really want to carry on doing this? Is this because I know exactly what you mean when you talk about being balls deep in it. When you've invested 15 years and you've skilled up to a certain level, and that's what you know. But you get to a point where you're kind of, oh, do I really want to do this for another 15, 20 years? And then you start to have thoughts about, okay, what could I do that's different? But you when you get to a certain level, and my background is the same as yours, basically. I was in national accounts, but I did it within in the entertainment industry. And I got to a point probably about 12 years ago where I was thinking, I don't think I want to do this anymore. This is not suited to me. I'm not really a salesperson. But I couldn't, you can't go back and reset your career to 15 years ago because you're at a certain salary level and you've got a mortgage and you've got a house
Yeah.
and so it's just not
Mm.
an option. And there's a real clear parallel, I think, with alcohol as well, in that you get to a stage where you're thinking, well, this is what I've always done. And am I going to change it now? But that sort of midlife piece around sort of 38, 39, 40, early 40s, that's when it's so common, I think, for people to start to question, I've been doing something for so long. Do I want to carry on doing it for the sort of the second half of my life? And you actually reminded me that thing I'd completely forgotten about. I actually, because I was in national accounts it would have been probably 12 years ago. I actually went for a national account manager job with one of the major brewers 12 years ago. Because I remember thinking,
All
if I'm
right.
gonna, it was with molten courts
Lots of
actually.
calls. Yeah.
Yeah, and my thought process was because I'd always worked in entertainment and like in movies and video games. I always wanted to work selling things that I liked and I was passionate about. And I remember my
Yeah.
thought process was, I don't know, why not go and sell beer? I'm really passionate about beer, and I
Yeah.
didn't. And I had like
Cool.
2 interviews and I didn't get the job. But I kind of wondered how my life might have played out had I got that job, because I sort of think
Mm.
when you're in a company and you're kind of in the culture and you're embracing the product, you're at the front line of being subjected to their advertising and their rhetoric in a way. And
Yeah.
I kind of wonder that I think things could have turned out really badly for me if I'd got that job. I think I could have got in a real mess with alcohol
Yeah.
being in that environment. It's so fascinating to hear you speak about it.
It is, yeah, and do you know what? Like listening to you say that there is exactly how I felt, and it was for me, an immersion into the product, and I've always been like that myself. I've always, deep down inside, I've always felt that you should do in life what you enjoy most. Like, and I see people who do jobs and they hate, and I just think, well, just do something else. Like you've always
Mm.
got a choice. You don't have to do a shit job. And like I know people get wrapped up in, earnings and salary and commitments and all that kind of stuff. But, ultimately we've all got a choice in this, that we can at any point in our lives we can choose to do something else. And for me, it's always been I've always chosen jobs and career moves based on being passionate and believing in the product. So every time I moved jobs
Mm,
within the drinks industry, it was always quite a well thought out move. Like I always felt like it wasn't just a case of jumping to the next stage or the next level or the next pay bracket. It was always like, right, does this job, does this employer, does this brand, does it align with, who I am, where I want to be, what I think is, you know, moving in the right direction within the industry. So, there was one of the moves I made was kind of left Matthew Clark and went to work for um, Hayman's, the family distillers. So, like the oldest surviving family gin distilling company in the world, funnily enough. And at the time, gin was on its massive growth trajectory. And I was like, yeah, this is
mm,
really exciting. I'd done the kind of bigger corporate organization. Matthew Clark had been acquired by a bigger company, had become this kind of behemoth of a business. And I didn't really like, I didn't really feel like my face fitted in that business anymore, and I wanted to go back to working in brands and work with an independent family business. So it felt really good. And then likewise, then when I left that business, I kind of got headhunted to go and work for a company called Specialty Brands, whose portfolio of products was products that when I was a bartender, I loved them. I was like, they were brands that I would aspire to have on my back bar, like really cool spirits. And I'm sort of glamorizing them a little bit here, but at the time, this is how I felt about it. and then get this opportunity to go and sort of set up this kind of, new division of national account sales for this company that I'd watched from a distance for many years and admired, their brands and the products that they sold. I was like, yeah, brilliant. That's where I want to be. So I always had this, kind of like, yeah, this sense of being passionate about it, really believing in what I sold. And then when I stopped, it's interesting actually, like kind of reflecting now, when I went from Heyman's to Specialty Brands, the interesting thing was within a month. So this was February 2020, and obviously we know what happened. Just very quickly after that, COVID kind of spread across the world, and within 3 or 4 weeks, I think 4 weeks after I started, we were put on furlough, and because I worked in no, we were told to work from home, so I'd literally just done my first month in the business, and then within a week we were all put on furlough because I worked predominantly in the on-trade sector, and the whole of the hospitality sector was shut down. And so it was really interesting that at that point this event happened, which when I can reflect now, I think that was the catalyst for me deciding that there was an imbalance in my life and recognizing there was changes that need to be made.
Yeah, obviously COVID, particularly for the hospitality sector, was such a massive impact. And where did it go for you from there? You say there that you had it was the kind of turning point for you. So what came next, really? How did COVID impact your drinking in a positive or negative way, or did you decide to make the change on the back of when it hit?
No, I mean it was weird. It was such a weird period, like reflecting on it, and it's almost. I think when we do, it's important to reflect on stuff like this because I think actually I remember thinking at the time about the unintended consequences that would potentially come out of basically an experiment. It was literally like a social experiment, essentially,
Mm.
like locking people in their houses,
Mm,
without really knowing. And I remember thinking at the time, this this is potentially going to affect people in the long term in a way that we don't even realize yet. And it had that effect on me. At first, the immediate feelings were, well, working from home for a week, thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit weird. Like, I'm not going to be able to get out anywhere and see anyone. And then all of a sudden, all the pubs and bars closed. And then the immediate feeling was, shit, everyone started to panic. It was like this was all of the income and revenue stream for the whole of the hospitality industry. So like they were still allowed to work in a confined space, so they pivoted into like, kind of cocktails through letterboxes and mail order cocktails and things like that. And give the hospitality industry its due, I don't think there is another industry that has quite the same ability to pivot and to change its business model, and work through adversity as the hospitality
mm,
industry. I, I,
mm,
I honestly think that it's admirable, and we should protect our hospitality industry like it's a national treasure, because I think at the moment the current government don't do that, sadly. That's another probably conversation to have entirely, but and then we got put on furlough, and that was kind of like, right, okay. And we went, at first it was like, oh shit, what does this mean? But then when you stripped it all back and actually realized that the kids weren't going to be in nursery, my wife was still going to be working from home, still on her salary. We were able to put the mortgage on a 3-month break and all this kind of thing. It's like work out. It's like, we're going to be all right here. Like, on balance, like, I don't think we're going to be any different. In many ways, I think we might even be better off, which is weird,
mm, mm,
And then the sun was out. It was really nice weather, and I had the kids at home trying to pretend to homeschool them, or into a degree. Like, I think my son was in.
Joe Wicks,
Yeah. Oh, there was that. Yeah. Like,
Jumpstart Johnny, we had. He's
oh,
even worse.
definitely that. And I think, that sort of started with all good intentions but failed, and that my son's primary school just weren't great at sharing stuff, and it was like, oh God. Quickly realized, this was just going to be about a period of trying to stabilize things, and not trying to put too much pressure on people. And then it was like another day that ended in a Y, and the sun was out and it was lunchtime. It was like the kids were playing in the paddling pool in the garden. It's like, well, let's have a gin and tonic. Like, I might
Mm,
as well crack a beer open, have a
mm,
glass of rosé.
mm,
So, like, there were times when, at first, I probably drunk more than I should have been. But I think by that point, because we had two kids, I was already going on the the natural route of drinking less, because my ability to manage the consequences of drinking were getting I was less capable of doing that, and it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The less I drank, the lower my tolerance became. The lower my tolerance became, the less I wanted to drink. The less I drank, the lower my, and it was just like a spiral
Mm.
like that.
Mm.
And there was a few occasions in COVID where, when things started to open up, and we all got a little bit stupid at times, didn't we? And it was like, I remember having a whiskey drinking competition with a neighbour who was Scottish, which was probably one of the stupidest things I could ever do. Sat round the fire pit in our garden, and I ended up having to be put to bed by one of the neighbours because I ended up throwing up in the fire pit. It's like, it's a really sort of
God.
responsible sort of way of behaving at sort of 40, 41 years old. It's just like stuff is like, fucking hell, this is just stupid. And but that was kind of like, you'd sort of laugh stuff like that off. You'd kind of see the neighbors in the street and be like, "Oh God, I'm really embarrassed," and just laugh about it. They're like, "Oh, it's all right, we've all been there." And actually, deep down inside, it was really starting to eat away at me, stuff like that. And
Mm.
this sort of almost recognition that it wasn't right. And then actually during COVID was when I think my running kind of changed, and my approach and my love of running, and my realization that running was such an important part of my life, because those hours that we got, those 1 hour opportunities we got to get out for exercise, was like, sacrilege to me. It was so important, and I would go out and every day would go for a run. And actually that became a bit of an addiction. And I think on reflection, I used to use that almost as my therapy, without actually being able to process what was going on in my head. So internally, what was going on psychologically, but also what was probably going on around me, and changing as an individual, and my view on life and my values were clearly changing. But I probably wasn't processing that, and I was going out running and using running as my form of therapy. Of course, I look back now and I now know that running is no replacement for therapy. It's very therapeutic, but it
Mm.
isn't a replacement for actual therapy, which is a way that I was probably using it at times. So then, actually, when COVID ended, and finally ended, which was probably not until 18 months after it sort of started, really. I think it was like the June, July, August the following year, 2021, went back to work and actually got brought back to work full time, whereas previously we'd been brought back sort of part-time furloughed. And it was like, right, okay, crack on, out you go. And just something wasn't right. And I was just like, I'm not feeling this at all. And it was really difficult for me to process this, because I was like, this is everything I've ever done. Why am I all of a sudden now not enjoying it? Or why can I now not bring myself to pick up the phone, or,
Mm.
get my bag onto my shoulder and go out and, visit customers? What's going on? Why am I really not interested in going to team meetings? And why am I not interested in going on these trips to meet producers and learning about new products? Why am I not getting excited about this stuff anymore? What the fuck is going on? Like a
Mm.
real kind of like proper identity crisis, like full on, like, I don't know who I am. What the hell's happening? Who this person that I thought I was isn't who I think I am. What the fuck is happening? Like, not like a midlife crisis, but a full on identity crisis.
Mm.
And yeah, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't work out what was going on. And I I, I remember sat at my parent-in-law's kitchen, my wife's mum and stepdad's kitchen table in the summer of 2021, June or July, I think it was. We'd kind of come back to work. I think it was July, because the kids were on summer holiday. And we were up with the kids at my in-laws, and I think my parents might have come up to stay as well. And I had something to do. I had a project to do. I was still working, so they'd all gone out for a walk. I remember sat at my in-laws' kitchen table, thinking about I'd be better. That everyone around me would be better off without me on this planet. Like, it had just got to the point where I didn't think that I deserved to be on the planet anymore. I even started thinking about how I could go and do that, and
Oh
and
wow.
and and potentially these people, my family, my loved ones, the people closest to me would, how they would come back, and it would almost be like a relief, like the burden of me would no longer be there for them. um and pretty challenging to process. And like, and like, I think there's, when you talk about sort of some a topic like suicidal ideation, like I think there's a lot of people out there that probably relate to it. I think, you know, in the sense that they've had these type of feelings, but would likely 99% likely never go and act on it. Like, and I think
Mm.
there's a lot of people out there who don't talk about it because they know they would never act on it. So they don't think it's a problem enough for them to actually talk about it. And that's what it was like for me. It was like, I think I'd be better off doing this, but I'm not going to do it. And then there's this kind of total dissonance of sort of sat there with these feelings, knowing that I'm not going to act on them, sort of a sense of shame, you know, like I'm pathetic, like real sort of self-loathing, like I'm not even brave enough to go and do the thing that I know I should do because it would be better for the people around me. So all of this sort of stuff comes into it, which is like, you know, like and so much to process, plus also the identity shit that's going on.
Mhm.
Um, Not really knowing where I was going with that, and then it was, and I'm a typical bloke. I didn't do anything about it, you know, despite kind of knowing that I'd been using running through COVID as a form of therapy replacement, and I knew deep down inside I need to go do something about it. And then, you know, relationship with my wife deteriorated over the coming months, and you know, depression really kicked in, and the knock-on effect of that, you know, started to impact not just me but other people externally. You know, I wasn't showing up as a dad, as a husband. You know, I was starting to withdraw myself from social situations. That was starting to impact me, and then but I was still going out and running, and I was really embracing my running, and I was just thinking, oh, if I can just chase those destination goals, like the next marathon, the next PB, that'll be all right. That'll help me. That'll get me to where I need to be. Everything will be all right once I do that kind of thing. And that was my way of sort of dealing with it, in inverted commas. And I remember booking. I remember me and my wife had a really frank conversation, um, and she basically said, look, you can't do this alone. You need to get some professional help. And I sort of accepted that I needed that, but again, didn't do anything about it. And then I did the Manchester Marathon in October 2021, physically fit, as fit as I'd been, you know, really for in my adult life, really on for a massive PB, and driving over there across the Pennines from Leeds to Manchester, and listening to a Mel Robbins podcast in the car on the way over, thinking, yeah, I'm really on for a really good marathon time, going to get a PB. And just something she said in that podcast just completely brought me to tears, and just totally breaking down in the car, and just like bawling my eyes out, and sort of this realization that I was physically, I was fit as a fiddle, fit as a butcher's dog, but mentally I was just completely broken. And then I went and did the marathon, and I smashed it, and I got a PB. And I remember sitting there at the end with my can of Erdinger alcohol free, and just thinking, now the fucking real hard work's got to start, because I've actually got to accept what's going on here, and I need to do something about it. You know, I can't keep brushing this mental health challenges under the table. I can't keep pretending that I'm all right. You know, there's something that's not right here, and I don't know what it is. And my historic coping mechanisms weren't serving me anymore. So I kind of accepted that at that point. Took me about another month or so to actually do anything about it. And I ended up reaching out to someone that I'd used to work in bars with years ago, who'd gone through a similar thing. And he had recently retrained as a coach. He'd kind of removed alcohol from his life, and a lot of, I'd gone to therapy in the past, but it never really landed with me. I'd never really gelled with the therapist. I didn't enjoy being sat on a sofa or a chaise longue or whatever, feeling kind of quite clinical. And you know, it was all great talking about my problems, but there wasn't any practical,
Mm.
you know, sort of sense of moving forward with things that came out of it. Um, and I'm quite a goal orientated person. And so, you know, kind of reaching out to someone who I could relate to, who I knew had worked in the industry, who'd gone through similar things that I'd been through, who'd retrained as a coach and was just starting out his coaching practice, um, reached out to him and just said, look, it'd be good to have a chat. Um, so we did. Um, and that was, I think that was in the early part of 2022, and I'd got to the end of 2021 and sort of kind of accepted that I was gonna take a break, going to take a clean break from alcohol. Um, at the time, it was the same thing. I'd booked a half iron distance triathlon in the summer of 2022, and I thought, that's my excuse. That's my excuse to do the thing that actually I deep down inside, whether I accept it or not at this point, is the thing that I know is going to probably help me the most, and that was taking a break from alcohol. So stopped drinking on the 30th of December 2021, had this event. Whenever anyone asked, it was like, oh no, I'm not drinking for 6 months because I'm training for this event and I want to smash it. That was my excuse. But knowing inside I needed to do more about it. So actually sort of reached out to my coaches, my mentors, who are still sort of good friends, and I actually support them now and do a little bit of freelance work for them now. And started working with them early 2022.
Wow, that's quite a story, Rich.
Love
So
it.
fast forward to when you actually did you did the marathon after the 6 months. So you completed the 6 months off. What did you do then?
So it's the half distance triathlon, half iron distance triathlon, in the June of 2022. And I remember speaking to like my closest mates from uni in, like, I don't know, February. And I remember distinctly being in a pub with one of them and sort of saying, having this conversation again. No, I'm going to do 6 months, and I'd done dry Januaries on several occasions. I think I'd done up to 3 months uh, alcohol free at this point. I said, no, I'm going to do 6 months, and I think, if I get to 6 months, I'm not even sure that I'll drink again. And he was like, you can't not drink. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you can't not drink because all of your mates drink. I was like, well, okay, so, and you can't not drink because your wife drinks, and you can't not drink because you work in the drinks industry. It's your career. And it's almost like convincing me that I can't not drink alcohol. I can't not
Mm,
do the thing that I deep down inside know. I'm pretty sure as hell it's not the root cause of my problems. Like I know that fundamentally. Like, and people can have healthy relationship with alcohol, and alcohol isn't the devil. It's the relationship that we have with it, which now in reflection I know is the main problem for people. But it wasn't the root cause of my problems, but I knew it wasn't helping. So I knew I had to, that was the thing that was probably going to help me unpick this stuff. So did that event, smashed it, really enjoyed training for it. I'm 6 months alcohol free. I'm getting all the benefits physically, mentally, spiritually, but I'm still working in the alcohol industry.
that's kind of why I asked, because it's
Mm.
obviously it's part at that point it's part of your brand. It's we talk a lot about identity on this podcast, and it's kind of you've obviously got 20 years of working in that
Yeah.
industry. It's kind of what right. It's not when you arrived at 6 months, was that pretty much like, I've set a 6 month target, I'm going to get to that 6 months, and you got there and you're kind of, okay, what happens now? Or along that 6 month period, were you already starting to think, what, when I get to the 6 months, I'm going to carry on anyway? Or talk a bit about that if you can.
Yeah, so from a personal perspective in terms of drinking alcohol, I think I'd already recognized that I wanted to keep going. Like, I hadn't put a number on it. Like, it was always kind of like an indefinite break. It was never forever thing. But I just was getting all the benefits, and I was like, I've got no interest in drinking alcohol again, like,
Mhm.
on a personal level, as a consumer. So I think I'd already recognized that and made that commitment probably 3 months in, I think 3 or 4 months in. So that was kind of like a personal lifestyle choice. But then actually, as I kind of got to that 6 months and that event, there was all this kind of, you know, other stuff, noise in my head going on around career and job. It's like, well, what the fuck are you going to do now?
Mhm.
Because clearly you're in this
Can't sell it, right?
situation. Well, I mean, you can,
Yeah.
in my head,
It's tough.
in my head, I'm saying to myself, just because I don't consume the thing I'm selling doesn't mean that I can't sell it. Like, there must be
Mm.
loads of people out there who work in sales jobs where they really don't buy into the product and they wouldn't
But you
consume
said
it or
yourself
wear it
earlier,
themselves.
you want to work with things that you're passionate about, and
Yeah, well,
I've
that was
worked.
the
I had one job where I was working for something that I just did not buy into. I thought, this is rubbish, and I couldn't sell it. I was just like, I can't tell people this is a piece of gold when I think it's a piece of shit. And it was just because you don't feel like you're being true to yourself. You don't feel, so that must have completely changed your career.
well,
You know,
yeah, well, that was exactly it, really. It was the recognition of the fact that it no longer aligned with my values,
yeah,
and
exactly.
I think in that 6 months, not just being alcohol free, but working with coaches, and realigning and starting to explore, you know, much deeper layers, you know, peeling back more layers of the onion, and the work I did with them around, you know, values and meaning and purpose and belief systems and, you know, language and all of this kind of stuff. It started to pique my interest, in coaching, but also in like, actually, maybe I'm not this person that I thought I was, this caricature identity that I'd created for myself. And actually recognition of what my values were, what my true values were. And you know, values change. And I think that the challenge that I think a lot of guys our age have, you know, come to, you know, which we see as coaches, I'm sure, but you know, it's this realization that, you know, midlife isn't necessarily a crisis point, but it's certainly a new phase of your life, and a new phase requires a new approach. You can't carry on doing the same things that you've done through your 20s and 30s and expecting to get the same results. It's like the old Einstein, you know, a quote, isn't it? You know, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, it's you know, it's insanity, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
expecting different
yeah.
results. So it's this acceptance that had to change in a different phase. And accepting, part of that was accepting that the career I'd built was no longer what I should be doing, and stepping away from it. So I think there was as I got to that 6 month stage, there was an acceptance that I needed to change careers and take a different path. What that looked like, and this was the hardest part. It was like, I knew what I didn't want to do anymore. I just didn't have a fucking clue what I did want to do, and that was really difficult. And there's still a bit of this now in some ways, kind of thing, like going on. You know, even 4 years later, because you know, I'd kind of got to a really successful point in that career, in that first 20 years of my career, you know, and then to have walked away from that and almost sort of ripped the rule book up and started again, you know, you kind of feel like you're sort of almost back at the beginning a little bit, and you know, that's still part of the journey I'm on now. So there's still a bit of a an element of, you know, letting go of previous identity for me at the moment, because I still have so many connections and network within that industry, as I'm sure Steve can probably appreciate as well. It's hard to completely pull yourself apart from that. Um, so anyway, I kind of started looking around at jobs. I interviewed for a few different jobs in different alcohol industry brands. Like, I thought, actually, well, maybe working closer to home for like a brewery local to me in Leeds. I had a couple of interviews for more local breweries, that kind of thing, you know, slightly lower level positions, you know, accepting maybe a little bit lower salary, but didn't get any of them. And actually, I think, you know, that's the best thing that could happen, because it wasn't what I needed. I might have thought that it was what I wanted at the time, but it certainly wasn't what I needed. And then something kind of popped up, really, which was a great segue for me. Again, it wasn't the right job for me, but it was the right job to get me out of what I was doing previously. And I ended up going working for a company in Leeds, actually, who were the biggest provider of security services to the hospitality industry. So it was like I was still able to use some of my connections and experience and understanding of hospitality and the way that that works, but I was just selling a different service compared to the product, the alcohol. I was selling a different service. It was the security side of things. But actually, going back to what we said before, James, about always doing something that you believe in and that you love in, I had no fucking interest in security, the security industry. Like, I'm not doorman. I'm a fucking skinny marathon runner. Like, put me around a group of doormen and I stand out like a fucking sore thumb.
I love
And
it.
so, like,
Go on,
all of a
let's.
sudden, yeah, and so all of a sudden, like, I'm having these conversations with like sort of area managers of doorman groups and companies for
That's
this
great.
business, you know, and they're talking about, like, you know,
Who they beat
tasty
up last
nights.
night?
Yeah, like kind of really stuff, like really tasty stuff that
Go on,
happened on
go
the
on,
floor
let's.
last night. Yeah, like, I had to kick these bunch of lads out, and all kicked off. I'm like, I'm not in my element here at all. Anyway, it was a great company. It was people that I really liked and still and connected with, and still respect hugely, and really grateful for them for taking me on. And I did 3 months, and I remember coming to the end of my 3 month probation period there, and my boss brought me in for my review, and I kind of knew deep down inside it wasn't working, and he clearly did as well. And you know, I sort of, in my head, and at this point, I'd already had the idea for Clean Break, so I'd already kind of had this vision of doing something else. So I didn't know how it was going to work or whatever, but I just had this idea that was going to become something. So that was distracting me. I was thinking, right, if I can just tread water for 6 months here, get Clean Break up and running, and then move into it and save a bit of money, it all would be good. Anyway, walked into his office and sort of sat down. He just looked at me, said, "This isn't going to go the way you think it is. We're not going to renew your contract." And I just looked at him and he stopped talking. I just sort of sat there and sort of looked at the wall and the ceiling for a couple of seconds, took a deep breath and just looked back at him and just said, "Thank you." And he sort of looked at me and he went, "What?" I said, "Thank you. Like, I've had this idea for something else that I want to do. And the reality of it is this isn't right for me. And I appreciate the opportunity you've given me to help me get out of what I didn't want to do anymore as a segue. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity you've given me, but I'm also grateful for the fact that you're forcing my hand to go and do this thing, which, I've aspired to do for many years, which is go and create my own lifestyle well-being brand, and follow a crazy dream, which up until this point I've been way too fearful of fear of failure and not done before. So yeah, so that was it really. And then Clean Break kind of immersed myself into the next phase really, which is, yeah, still very much where I am now.
So it's been great hearing you talk, but we've come to, and I heard you a while ago, and obviously leading into clean break, saying that on the 21st, was it the 30th of December 2021, you
Yeah,
decided to take a clean break from alcohol. So that's a nice, lovely segue into
yeah.
exactly where we are now. So tell us about clean break and the clean break and how that's brought you to where you are now. And I'm itching to kind of talk about your running and how you make running work within that space as well, because I know running is so much more to you and Andy than just putting your feet in front of each other, and it's so much more about growth now as well. So where did you go from there, and how did that lead to where you currently are now?
Yeah, so clean break actually started life as I was in the car with my wife and the kids, and I was thinking about what I'd done and the fact that I'd taken a break away from things that were no longer serving me in my life anymore. This kind of, I'd left the drinks industry. I think I was in the security job at the time, and I was just sort of reflecting on that, like we are when you're driving along and kind of reflecting on things and mulling things over in my head and just thinking. Yeah, I made a clean break from a career that was no longer serving me, from habits, from beliefs, from behaviors, from values. Clean break. Oh, maybe I should write a book. Yeah, clean break. My messy divorce from alcohol. So that was how it started. It was literally an idea to write a book, which at some point I probably still will do when the time feels more appropriate. And I said that to my wife in the car. I said, "I'm going to write a book," and she went, "What?" I mean, you haven't even read many books in recent years. Like, I can't imagine you writing one. And I was like, no, honestly, hear me out here. I was like, it's going to be called Clean Break, my messy divorce from alcohol. She's like, okay, right. Might not be like, it's not going to transform our world financially, but yeah, if it inspires you, then do it. So anyway, I dwelled on that for a few days and thought, actually, no, like that's not going to happen. But then when I was working with my coaches during that 3 month period whilst I was in the security job, I went to a weekend retreat with them that they did. And we did a lot of work around, goals, values, what's important in our lives, where do you want to go, what do you want to get out of life? What are the things that are holding you back? All this kind of stuff. And a lot for me was coming up around the fact that I wanted to, do something for myself, create my own business. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to be self-employed, get a bit of, creates a sense of freedom, really, is what I was looking for. Not necessarily financial freedom initially, but certainly kind of freedom of time and space and money and awareness. And so when I was on that retreat, this idea of clean break was bubbling away. And then I actually sort of had this epiphany. I was like, well, clean break doesn't have to be a book. Maybe clean break can be a product that I sell. Well, maybe I can create my own alcohol-free beer brand. So that's where it started. And literally on that retreat, the commitment I made was when I ended, the first thing I did was went and registered the business on Companies House. So I registered the business there as soon as I left there. And we did a exercise on that retreat, which is called a see-through goal, which is still one of the most powerful sort of goal setting exercises that I do with my community members now, coaching group now, whereby you kind of almost like you write down in 6 months' time as if you've achieved everything you're setting out to do. So it's almost like a manifestation or visualization, writing it down. And then a few months later, when I'd started working on Clean Break, I'd also then, and funnily enough, one of the other things I did whilst when I sort of started working on Clean Break was luckily sort of realized that I probably needed something to fall back on just in case. And the experience I'd had with coaching led me to think, well, maybe I kind of go down the route of training as a coach as well. Andy Ramage was in my sphere, you know, alcohol free, was training coaches. And I thought, well, actually, this is something which appeals to me because I've always enjoyed coaching people or educating people around, you know, alcohol and training bar staff and you know, staff members and things like that. So sharing knowledge with people. So I lent into that as kind of like the backup, self-development. It was never the thing that was going to be primary. And on the first course that I did with him, I remember pulling out this see-through goal that I'd done, and it was like 3 or 4 months after I'd done it, and I'd written it for 6 months in the future. And I remember pulling it out and going, I've done that, 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 I've done that's happening, I've done that, that's happening. And just ticking off all these things and thinking, wow, that's really powerful. So Clean Break was coming to life as an alcohol-free beer brand. I was retraining as a coach as well, as a kind of a backup, you know, self-development, self-discovery type stuff, still unpeeling the layers of the onion around identity and all that kind of stuff, and also cementing my kind of my values and my alcohol-free journey as well. Um, and then yeah, and then throughout sort of that period of kind of 2023, I launched Clean Break initially in May 2023 as an alcohol-free beer brand, thinking, of course, stupidly thinking, of course, well, I've got 20 years of experience in the drinks industry. I could do this all. I can do it all by myself. I know it all, the industry, you know, inside out. I can do it all. I can do logistics. I can do production. I can do finance, marketing, sales, everything. I can do it all myself. No, you can't. That's a very, very, no, you can't, unless you've got a lot of money, which I didn't have. And anyway, so it was great. Like the experience of taking an idea from, you know, concept of just an idea in my head to actually creating your own product, was brilliant. And I got so much from it and I loved it. And I'm really super proud of doing that. But it was bloody hard, you know, and the creation of it bit was the fun bit. It was when I had the products and then I had to sit down and start doing actually everything, all of it myself, all of the time. It was near on impossible. And I did it for 9 months, I think, and then got to January 2024, and actually my mental health had suffered from it. You know, I was doing all the hours that would come. I was out doing deliveries. I was doing obviously sales, marketing, finance. You know, doing everything, and it was just too much to handle myself. You know, and lots of lessons learned along the way, but you know, actually it was taking away more than it was giving to me. And I kind of, again, working with a coach at the time, you know, he kind of said to me, look, what would it feel like to let go of this at the moment? I was like, well, immediate thoughts where it would feel like a failure. Um, but actually, the more I thought about it, it would feel like a lot of pressure off my shoulders, and it would be taking a lot of expectation off my shoulders, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be a forever thing. You know, just be like, this isn't working right now. Pause it for now. Move on to something else. So I did that. Went back to work part time, for a charity in Leeds, or actually the main drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in Leeds. So it was quite good timing, and didn't work in the recovery part of that business, of that charity. Worked in the sort of career part, so helping people that were coming through recovery to get back into meaningful employment. I'd done recruitment many years ago in the past, so it fitted quite well. Did 3 days a week for them. That covered sort of my financial costs on a base level. And then at the same time, I was starting to coach people a little bit. People were coming to me for a little bit of advice around running coaching. And my running was starting to get more important as well. So that year as well, as, and probably part of the reason why I maybe got to the point where I was burnt out was because I was doing too much running again. So again, still this sort of recurring theme of over indexing in running and doing too much of it and not having a healthy relationship with running, which I have now. You know, doing like 3 ultra marathons in the first 6 months of, you know, 2023 probably wasn't the greatest idea, whilst also trying to launch my own alcohol-free beer brand. Um, but the beer and the running were sort of aligned. So a lot of the inspiration for the beer came from my running as well, for various different reasons. You know, everything as part of the design and the logo and all that kind of stuff. Um, So yeah, so that's where that got to, and then yeah, just accepted that it was going to go on pause for a period. Worked for the charity, um, took some time to step back and actually kind of give myself a bit of space to think a bit clearly about what was going on and what I wanted to do. And the coaching sort of started to happen naturally at this point through 2004. Um, I was able to give myself a bit of time to start. I'd been doing a few kind of cohorts of kind of couch to 5K, helping people get running, 8-week kind of programs that I'd done for free at first, and then charging a little amount of money, and people were getting a real, seemed to really enjoy them, and it was really helping people, and I was enjoying it. So carried on doing that. And then, at some point in that period as well, like Andy and I kind of were put together. Twist of fate, perhaps, if you say, but everything happens for a reason. And we we were sort of put together by introduced to each other by a kind of a common contact. Because they said, well, you're both doing very similar things. You're both ultra runners. You're both coaches, alcohol-free coaches. You're both creating communities and running groups. You should speak to each other. So we did. He would just gone through he was going through a very difficult period in his life. He'd recently lost his dad. He'd also just come off the back of finishing treatment for prostate cancer as well. So he had a lot going on. Anyway, we got together on a call. We got on really well, hit it off, realized we were doing very similar things. We were like, there's something in this, like we should do something together. We didn't know what or why or how or when or where, but we kind of just were like, yeah, let's. Yeah, he said, let me, because he needed time to process his loss, and we didn't quite know what it was going to look like. And then we stayed in touch, and then the first thing that we sort of suggested that we do together was the podcast, actually. So I said to him, look, I'd done a podcast. I'd started a podcast originally, Finding Jomo, The Joy of Missing Out, which was a year or so before. Again, probably another reason why I failed at the beer, because I just tried to do everything. It's that whole, I'm alcohol free. I've got all this time and confidence and clarity.
Yeah.
I'm going to do fucking everything rather than focusing on one thing. And I think there's a bit
totally relate to that.
I think there's a bit of neurodivergent brain in me as well, quite honestly. And that's another journey that I'm starting to explore a bit now, funnily enough. But yeah, so we kind of started doing the podcast together, originally under a different name, because Andy had his alcohol-free runners Facebook group. I had Clean Break, and we couldn't agree which brand it would sit under. So we kind of took a sort of a neutral brand, a name that we started it under. Loved it, enjoyed it from day one, enjoyed talking to each other cathartically, just like you guys probably do, and having guests on. And then shortly after that, I said, look, it was getting to the sort of the end of 2024, and I said, look, I'm gonna do my first marathon group coaching cohort. I'd done these 5 and 10K groups, and I thought, well, now December time is now when people are starting to think about starting training for, Brighton, London, Paris, Manchester, Leeds marathon. So I'm going to do this. And we've been talking about, doing something and running as well together. And I sort of said, I'm going to do it, like, just to let you know. I don't want you to think that I'm doing it without, talking to you about it. So just to let you know, if you want to be involved, fine. If you don't, absolutely no problem. I just thought I'd let you know that's what I'm doing. And he'd done a couple of half marathon groups previously as well. But that had sort of slowed a bit with the person that he was doing that with previously. And he said, no, actually count me in. Let's do it. Let's go. Let's do it then. So that's where our first Clean Break coaching group marathon cohort came from. So we did spring 2025 marathon group. And that's where it all sort of started. And then we sort of registered our business together, Clean Break Consultants. My second business, sort of this time last year, really, it was kind of made everything official, pivoted the podcast name, renamed that to Clean Break Chats. And so everything sort of began to sit under Clean Break. So Clean Break Chats podcast, Clean Break Coaching, and Clean Break Brewing is still in the background, and I'm sure I'll bring that back at some point. But yeah, Clean Break stands for, helping people make or take a clean break from things that are no longer serving them in their life, whether that is, a relationship with an unhealthy relationship with alcohol or other substances, habits, behaviors, relationships, beliefs, values, careers, whatever it might be. It's about, showing people that, change can happen, and behavioral change can happen, and it happens through taking action. But, to take action, you need a bit of accountability, you need a bit of discipline, and, you need a bit of discomfort as well. And actually having someone to support you on that journey can really help. So we ultimately support people along those journeys of change. And it's been very running orientated, but actually now what we're seeing is there's a huge demand for, alcohol-free coaching, and we're now sort of pivoting more so towards the alcohol-free coaching, and specifically from a niche, you know, alcohol-free coaching for runners, and in fact probably neurodiverse runners as well, because Andy's had his ADHD diagnosis, and the more I talk to him about it, the more I think, fucking hell, that is so me. And the more there's things are coming up now at the moment that I'm now reflecting on more so myself in my past, and thinking, God, that makes so much sense.
Mm.
So I may go down that own personal journey of understanding that a little bit more at some point. But yeah, that's where it brings us up to the current day.
That's wonderful. Have you got any kind of advice for people, Rich, who are just maybe they're in the early stages of being alcohol free, perhaps in the first few months, and they're starting to think, well, you know what, maybe I'm ready to start doing a bit of exercise. I've got the alcohol under control. What's next for me? You know, if they're interested in running, what kind of advice would you give to people to sort of, if they're starting to think, yeah, I think might want to take that on. What's a good way to get into it?
Yeah, just I think the most important thing with any of this is just to take it one day at a time, And I think we get goal setting is a huge part of coaching, as you guys well know, and behavior change, kind of taking you from where you are to where you want to get to. So clarity over your goals is really important. Knowing that that goal is aligned to purpose, and meaning, which in itself makes it more aligned to values. So, it's more likely to be a journey that is an enjoyable one and that has meaning and purpose to it. But we can get so caught up on that trajectory, on that kind of North Star, that end goal, that destination goal, as I call it, that we almost forget to enjoy the journey. We forget to enjoy the process. So actually, the destination goal is all well and good to have, but if all we fixate on is the end goal, the destination goal, then the likelihood is, whether we achieve it or not, we're going to be left with a little bit of feeling of underwhelm, and there's going to be a bit of a void, because there's always more. You
Mm,
can always run further, you can always run faster, you can always have more money, you can always have the next career move, you can always have a bigger house, you can always have a faster car, you can always have more in life. But actually, the most important thing is to just focus on what you've got here and now, and what you need to do in this moment. Like, what do I need to do today that takes me one step closer to my goal? Whether that is, taking a break from alcohol. And it's always been the case for me when it comes to alcohol. And to this day, I still say it. I know I'm not drinking today,
mm,
and I'm pretty sure as hell I'm not going to drink tomorrow. A year's time, I don't know. 10 years time, I don't know. you know the longer I go on the journey, the less likely I think, the more I think, what's the point?
Mm.
So the closer I move away from ever drinking again, I get. And then the same with running. It's like, you know don't, if you've got aspirations to run, whether it's couch to 5K, half marathon, 10K marathon, ultra marathon, whatever it is, that's in the distance, that will come, you'll get there. But what's important is that you focus on what you've got to do today, and that's getting your trainers on, and not worrying about that end goal, that destination goal, not
mm,
fixating on that thing that seems unachievable at the moment. Because not drinking ever again seems quite unachievable for people. The concept of never drinking again, to
mm.
someone who's probably drunk every other day for 20 years of their life, that's a really difficult thing to fathom and process.
It's not necessary to say that though. Talk about this a
But a
lot.
lot of people do, though, don't they?
Yeah.
That's
I
the
know.
thing.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
that all or nothing sort of approach. And again, it's the same with running. It's like, people come and they say, oh, I could never run a marathon. And it's like, well, not today, but you don't have to run
Yeah.
it today. You don't have to do that today. And when you chunk it down and help people kind of, it's that idea of, how do you eat an elephant? You chunk it down into small manageable chunks, small bite-sized chunks.
I think it's listening to an episode that you on your podcast last week, and you were very much reflecting on what running is to you, and something you've started doing recently, because and I'm going to start doing the same thing and I'm not going to shock our viewers, but when you mentioned about running naked
Yeah.
Oh
and
God,
what
please
that
no.
no and what that means. Do you want to explain what running naked actually is, Rich? And actually, I think what this really does is actually connect you to the reason why you want to run. And not everybody will necessarily want to go and become a runner when they go alcohol free, and that's not what this is about. But it's that reconnecting into why we actually run and what it serves us, rather than I need to be the next. But there's so much presence on from Instagram runners at the moment about I'm going to do
Yeah.
the next biggest thing, and getting all caught up in the tech, and I'm going to run this, I'm going to run that. So explain what running naked is and put our readers, our listeners' minds at rest.
Listeners, yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And like there is it does feel like there is a lot of toxicity around in the kind of influencer space, from running perspective. And look, this happens quite often. It's not just happening now with running. It happens with a lot of trends when they become popular and people jump on the bandwagon and want to get something out of it for themselves. And it can become a little bit toxic. And you'll see people now going out there, and influencers that have got hundreds of thousands and millions of viewers, and they're going out and showing the highlights reel of running, and the Spencer Matthews and people like that of this world, who have got arguably teams behind them that enable them to do these incredible challenges, but it's not reality for most of us. And I think it can lead people to chasing unrealistic goals. And I've got views on when it comes to goal setting around what's realistic and achievable. That's another conversation to have. But kind of making people feel like they're not worthy because they're not doing 100 kilometers or 100-mile races. And like we had a great guest on the podcast, a guy called Stuart Holiday, a sports psychologist, and he talked about this concept. We were talking to him about the idea of destination goals versus process goals, and the importance of knowing where you're going, but also the importance of enjoying the journey, the process. And he sort of had another layer to that, and he said, yeah, we also need to have open goals where we just go out without a particular goal in mind, just for the sake of it. And he said we're all running our version of the Olympics. Like, we're all doing that. And just because someone's training for a 5K for the first time doesn't make that goal any less um outstanding or incredible or awesome to achieve than someone else's goal, because it's all relative to the individual. But this toxicity that I think comes on social media that around running can make people feel like that, that their own version of the Olympics isn't as worthy as someone else's. So the idea of running naked really, for me, comes back to what you just said there. It's that why, that purpose, that meaning. And whenever and people who run will appreciate this, that you don't always love running. Like, I'm in a running funk at the moment, as I could like to call it. Like, I'm not loving my running. I'm not hating it. I'm just not loving it. It kind of feels quite going through the motions. And there's a number of reasons why: the weather, the time of year, lots of other stuff going on, which means that I'm not perhaps as inspired for it as I might be other times. But that's fine. And I know that this too shall pass, and I'll feel better about it soon. But what I often do when I'm in this sort of zone is I go back to my original sort of purpose, my original why. And I often go back to my local park run, Woodhouse Moor in Leeds, which is one of the biggest outside of London. It's where it all started for me 18 years ago. And I just go there because it reminds me of why I run. And I run because of the freedom. There's the people ask me why I don't drink alcohol and why I run. And the commonality across the two is freedom. Both of them give me freedom to live my life the way I want to. And so finding freedom in running, you don't, when you're out running and you've got a watch on or a heart rate monitor, or you've got your phone on Strava on loudspeaker telling you what to do, that's not freedom. That's you basically being beholden to a piece of tech and a device telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing. That doesn't know how you feel. That doesn't ask you the question whether you care about this run or not. So actually ditching all of that tech, ditching those devices, getting rid of it all. So this is the naked part of it, leaving all that at home and just going out for a run with an open goal, with no real sort of intention behind it, other than you're just going to go out because it makes you feel good. And it just really helps you reconnect. And I started doing this at the start of this year, and I'd done it in the past, and I kind of realized I needed it, because the first time I did it, I got down to on one of my normal run routes, down to the first crossroads over a roundabout, And the first thing I did when I got to the road and stopped was I reached with my right hand to my left wrist as if I was going to pause my watch. And then I realized I didn't have my watch on. And I just said, it doesn't fucking matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Just why? And I realized I needed this so much because it had become such a habitual process in my running, to care so much about the data. And people will say stuff like, oh, if it's not on Strava, it doesn't count. Fucking bullshit.
So you guys are completely different to me because I run 3 times a week, 6K, and I do time it, but more just to log the days that I've run. I never go for personal best. I don't even check the time.
And I think
It doesn't.
that it does serve its purpose, but I totally get where you're coming from, Rich, and that because when you're so het up on the stats and I don't, when I'm out for a run, I don't think I've ever really, when I'm running for myself, I don't think I ever really want to run and achieve personal goals, personal best. But yeah, I'm guilty of wanting to run. For me now, being that bit older, it's as far as I can and for as long as I can, and of course the data is important and really, um, for your training. But ultimately, one of the biggest switches I saw, and I realized how, and this is a few years ago now, the further I run, the less I wanted to have my headphones in. I don't want music anymore. It's about me being in my own head, and I can comfortably be in my own head for 6 hours and or longer if needs be, or
Yeah.
days if needed. But the freedom it gives you of actually, that's why we run, and certainly once out on the trails, to be in that environment and taking everything in and being in your own head is the biggest thing for me. And I'm absolutely going to start doing this running naked now, in the description that you've given, not in what we initially thought running naked was, because yeah, I could scare quite a few people doing
We'll live stream it.
that.
Honestly, it is liberating. It
Yeah.
really is. And I think you should do it, if for nothing else other than the reason that I've just talked about there, to identify whether you may have a slightly unhealthy relationship with the tech and the devices that you're
Mm,
relying on. Because for me, running comes down to three key components. We've got our body, the physical running element. That's really important, moving your legs. That your legs sometimes feel heavy, sometimes they want to go, sometimes they don't. You've got the mind. Okay, you've got the psychological bit up here, the clearing of the mind. Sometimes your brain will be telling you need to go for a run, sometimes it will saying you don't, limiting beliefs, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes both those things will want to go for a run, and sometimes they both want to go, they don't want to go for. And when they don't, you've also got the third element, which is your soul. It's the heart, it's the why, it's the purpose, it's the bit in here. It's why you do it in the first place. Because for most people, we don't start running because we want to track our data on Strava. We want to start running because we want to feel better about ourselves. We want to live better. We want that sense of freedom. It makes us feel good. So those three elements, and it's a bit like, it's the running equivalent of going to a concert and watching the concert with your phone in front of you and just kind of videoing every single part of it. It's this it's kind of moving back to an analog approach to life. Whereas everything has gone very, very digital.
mm.
And I think again, it's going back to, like, you see posts on LinkedIn, and clearly people have just put it into ChatGPT and they've not even edited it or checked it, or you're just like, oh god, it's so clearly not like just your
Yeah,
own
yeah,
words. Yeah, yes, they
yeah.
probably you know done the prompt, but it's not all their own words. And I think it's the same with running. It's like the same with a lot of things in life. It's stripping it back to the basics, and I think we've lost in so many areas of life. We've lost this sense of, like, real visceral connection with who we are and what makes us feel good.
Mm.
Because when you're running and you do get to that road and you go to reach for your watch and stop your watch, and it makes you think it doesn't matter. The stats don't matter. The data doesn't matter. How far I've gone, it doesn't matter how far I've gone. Why am I worried about how far I've gone? Why am I worried about how quickly I'm running? Why am I worried about how long I've been out for? It doesn't, none of it matters. What matters is how it makes you feel physically, mentally, and spiritually. And you can only connect with all three of those parts effectively without the distraction of the data and the tech.
And no one cares. And I'm gonna give you a very short story now as to why no one cares. 3 or 4 years ago, my brother qualified as a pilot. I'm mindful of time, but my brother qualified as a pilot, and he flew me down to the Isle of Wight, and I put it on Strava for a laugh. I ran 110 miles in an hour in a straight line to the Isle of Wight. 10 people gave me kudos, and no one questioned what I'd done.
I, so I used to work with a fella, a lovely guy, and he really got into running, and he did the same thing. He was obsessed with beating one of my times on my watch, and I was looking at it going, Christ, that's way quicker than I've ever run before. And basically, I was in the car, and he'd been using it basically
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
yeah,
a broad stick for about 6 months. So I said, look, I've got to actually run straight across a river.
It's so
No one
fascinating.
cares.
It
Yeah,
really is. No, honestly, no one cares. No one
yeah,
really cares, you know. And I
yeah,
think for a lot of us, this is whole part of kind of almost getting over yourself a little bit. And you know, I think for me, it relates back to, you know, the sort of the process goals versus the destination goals. It's enjoy the
mm,
process for what it
yeah,
is. And funny enough, that's what I've done, and you know, up until Valencia Marathon in December, you know, I've very much changed my approach to my training and much more embraced the process without fixating on the end goal. And funnily enough, actually, you know, the side effect of that was that I took 11 minutes off my marathon PB, you know,
yeah.
despite doing 20% less volume at a lower intensity and not fixating on the times and the efforts. And it just kind of happened organically. So
Mm.
there's a lot to be said for it.
Oh, Rich, I think we could easily take up another hour or two chatting, and it's always so good when we get together and chat, especially when running comes into the subject as well. But
Yeah.
it's been so good to hear your story and learn so much more about how Clean Break came around and the work that you're doing now. And if people want to find out more about Clean Break and yourself and Andy and the work that you do, where's the best place to find?
Yeah, socials is probably the best place at the moment to find. So Instagram clean.break.coaching. That's everything for us. And then me and Andy are both cleanbreak.rich, cleanbreak.andy personal accounts, and then LinkedIn as well. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Website is one of those many things that's kind of ongoing in bit of construction and deconstruction and playing around with, which, you know, I'm not sure how important it is to have a website, but we seem to, for some reason, be convincing ourselves that it is. And that's take dash a dash clean break. But we have bought the URL to clean break coaching. So we may pivot that into that. But that's the best. Yeah, Instagram mainly is the best place to find us.
Awesome. We'll stick all of
Brilliant.
that in the show notes as well, so that people can find you.
And
And
Clean Break Chats podcast as well.
of course, the Clean Break.
Your
Of
second
course.
favorite podcast of the week.
I love it. I love it. I am your number one listener, I'm sure. I love it. And thanks, honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat.
Yeah,
And
great to see you, Rich.
yeah, we
No,
need to
thanks
get
for
out
having
for a
me.
run again soon.
Definitely, mate. Yeah,
I'll,
that's
All
I'll
right.
good.
stay out of that one. Take care of
Fantastic.
yourself.
Take care.
Good to see you
Cheers.
guys. See
Cheers.
you
Bye bye.
soon. Bye bye now.